President Trump is flagging that the US will be announcing some form of action against China as a result. What can we expect, do you think?
It's difficult to know. It's quite common for the president to say something and then for it to take a couple of days before it works its way out through the bureaucracy. But it is clear that there's several things on the president's mind right now. One, the overall narrative of blaming China for the COVID-19 pandemic is something that he and the Republican Party have been keen to do, and more immediately has been focused on Hong Kong. The decision of China to push a new national security law on the territory of Hong Kong not only violates the basic agreement that was agreed to between the UK and China back in 1997, but has really raised concern. As to whether there are trade sanctions, we're not quite clear. But again, it's just been hinted at the president at this point. It adds to an already tense relationship between the United States and China today.
And Gordan, on the pandemic in the US, how are things looking now? We do seem to see some improvements in some states more than others. There are fears, though, that lifting lockdowns could really set the whole country back.
One of the things that has not been nearly understood enough over the last 2 weeks has been that general flattening of the U.S. curve in terms of the number of COVID-19 cases looks very different once you factor out large population centers, and in New York in particular. And so outside of New York City, the number of cases continues to grow in rural areas. And so the numbers are smaller, but the rate is still alarming. And that is even before we see the lag effect of the reopening of economies, particularly in rural areas. Over the weekend, I think viewers in Australia and globally were shocked by footage of a lake in what's called the Lake of the Ozark, where there were just packs of young people celebrating on boats and swimming pools without face masks, without social distancing. And it's led to concern that because of the politicization of this in the U.S., there's really a backlash against face masks, a backlash against following the Trump administration's own guidance on this issue, and that the consequences of that aren't being seen today, but they'll be seen 2 weeks, 3 weeks down the road in a resurgence. And so that's the real worry, the real concern.
And you're right. I mean, coronavirus really has become the political issue in the US in the lead up to the November election, and it's turning out to be a really divisive debate.
It is, and understandably so, right? I mean, this is a president, and President Donald Trump, who was planning to ride to re-election based on the strength of the economy. And with the United States approaching, if not having just crossed, 100,000 dead as a result of the coronavirus and the resulting economic impact of it, that changes the messaging around that an awful lot. There does appear to have been a decision on the part of the president's reelection campaign, on the part of the Senate Republican Campaign Committee and the president himself, to do as much as possible to focus on China, to shift the blame there. And now clearly there are questions that the world needs to be answered about how the virus developed and China's role early on in that process. But this is really a political move in the United States. It is made more complicated by the fact that for the first 3 months of this crisis, so in January, February, and March, the president was on record in the White House no fewer than, I think, 37 different times praising China's response, touting his relationship with Xi Jinping, their transparency and openness. And so this is a little bit of a complicated message for the United States right now.